Now I've created a really bad pose to really showcase what a bad silhouette looks like. In this case, it almost looks like her head's growing out of her legs in the camera view. Now notice in the pose, Kayla is also holding the ball, which is facing towards the camera, and this gets lost within her head. Now, the ball, her hands, they're all caught in within the main mass of her body. In animation, we want to make sure our characters have a clear silhouette so that we can kind of understand what's happening in the scene, even if we saw it at a glance. If we hide the floor plane in Maya, we can press the turn on lights button in our viewport, which is a little light bulb, or we can press 7 on our keyboard, and this will turn on the lights in our viewport. The silhouette is the biggest and most encompassing shape of our pose. It's a great way of seeing the whole body clearly, and this is a great way to help us find any problems that there may be in our poses, and to quickly design the shape of the body as a graphic shape. You'll see that the pose makes sense if we rotate the camera in the perspective view to a certain degree, and that will make the throwing of this ball pose look a little bit clearer. Now, it's important that if things aren't working at any time in your animation, it's a good time to repose. And what we want to do is take the body and put it into a slightly different pose. We will rotate the body around slightly so that it's clearer in the camera view, and we'll start spacing out the limbs a little bit better. We'll work on the torso, and we'll work on the arms and the hand poses, and adjust the head position as well, just so that everything reads better from our camera. A lot of times, just by turning our character by 30 or 40 degrees might help us make the pose a lot clearer. To make Kayla's pose feel more dynamic, we're going to look at her line of action, and we're actually going to take it and tilt it to a side so it forms more of a diagonal curve to screen left. By having her slightly off balance, it's going to feel like she's more in motion, and it's really going to help us sell the idea that she's throwing this ball with great force. By keeping the ball separate from the body, we're going to give it a more sense that it's being thrown away from Kyla's hand. And we're going to use the rear hand and the bent foot to kind of like give her a sense of balance as well, so that she's almost catching her weight. Switching on our lights again, we can see how the silhouette is looking. It's a little bit clearer, but it's still not right. We can tell that there's a little bit more balance that needs to come into the pose, and also we need to work on the silhouette of the fingers a bit more so that it really feels like she's actually throwing the ball. So the reason why creating a clear silhouette is so important for animation is that when we have an animated character like Kayla, she's slightly cartoony. There's not really that much detail in her. She's a simplified version of a human being. In this case, what we need to do is that we need to make her expressions and her poses much more clearer than, say, a realistic character, because there's less detail that we can work on. An example I always give to students is the idea that imagine that you're looking at somebody and they're 50 meters or 200 yards down a road. They're really, really, really tiny, but you can still pick up a lot of their body language even at a distance. What we're really doing is exaggerating things to make things clear. So if somebody was trying to point something out to you from far away, their gestures would be much more exaggerated. Now that's just the way that we have to think about doing these poses. They're not meant to be realistic, but they're meant to be an interpretation of what we see in reality. When posing the head, don't forget, if your character has hair or a ponytail like Kayla has, to actually pose that out as well. Now in this case we're doing an action pose, so we're going to drag the hair behind the head and give it a little bit of a wave so that it feels like it's caught in the wind. So even though we're posing from one main camera, we are going to finish off by looking at the pose in the perspective view and checking that it works from all angles. It's almost like it has to work like it's a sculpture more than a flat drawing. Now let's look at the end silhouette and see the final pose. There could be some improvement still, and we could even make the line of action even clearer, but now it's got a nice sense of flow to it, and the main thing that I can say about the pose is that it is exceptionally clear that she is throwing a ball, and her direction and her intentions are very, 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 very clear at a glance. And we want to use silhouette as a way of understanding how to actually create good poses.